Everyone, welcome to the Friends of NPACE Podcast. I'm Lisa Mathis, the ANCC Program Director here at NPACE and a practicing nurse practitioner. I am so excited, beyond words, to introduce today's guest and our topic. Dr. Charrita Ernewein is a family nurse practitioner who specializes in pediatrics. She is an assistant professor at the University of Tampa and works for the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay as a sexual assault nurse examiner. Dr. Ernewein completed her BSN at Marquette University in Milwaukee, and her MSN and DNP at South University, and her PhD at University of Central Florida. She is a strong advocate within the community who works closely with professional organizations and community resources regarding human trafficking and vulnerable populations. Dr. Ernewein is the Director of Community Education with the FREE Network and published Human Trafficking, Recognition, Referral, and Treatment in the Journal of Nurse Practitioners. Her dissertation focused on survivors of human trafficking and their reintegration into the community. Dr. Ernewein is the president of Tampa Bay Advanced Practice Nurse Council Group, a member of AANP, the Black Nurses Association, and the National Association of School Nurses. I'm so excited to have you here. I just can't tell you. This is such a great topic. It's near and dear to my heart. So let me start out by welcoming you, and you introduce yourself, anything else you need to add, and tell me and the audience, how did you find your way into the nursing profession?
Well, thank you, Lisa, so very much for that great introduction. So for me, nursing's in my blood. I'm going to say it that way. My aunt was a nurse, so I inherited that gene, that desire to be a caregiver. And I recently, I'm sure you may know Dr. Loretta Ford. She was one of the founders for nurse practitioners. I recently attended her 104th birthday, which I think it was just a week ago.
Wow.
And as Dr. Ford would say, my profession is nursing and my role in nursing is a nurse practitioner. So nursing has been nothing but kind to me. It's allowed me to travel, to care for people in need, to be an advocate and an educator for my patients, and to be a professor, a teacher, a mentor for future nurses and nurse practitioners. So it's been something great that's been near and dear to my heart. So when I graduated, I went to Marquette University, and then went on for my master's and doctoral degree. I was like, I'm done. And here I am now with my PhD and really focusing on human trafficking. I'm also a chairperson for the board of directors for Shared Hope International, which is an anti-trafficking organization. And we have several campaigns and numerous trainings to increase awareness. So I really enjoy being out here, increasing knowledge on this topic.
Absolutely. What a great story. I know your family's so proud. Wow. And that is definitely bragging to get to go to her 104th birthday. Wow. Yes. That's amazing. So how did you become interested in human trafficking and that vulnerable population?
So my interest overall in general was, in vulnerable populations. So it started when I trained to be a sexual assault nurse examiner. I'm going to say over 20 years ago, because that's where I stop at, in a pediatric facility in San Antonio, Texas. We were the first in-house SANE pediatric facility in San Antonio. So there are seven of us nurses, and we covered the emergency room 24 hours, 7 days a week. So I'm sad to say, unfortunately, that we were really busy. So when I decided to complete my DNP, my doctoral degree, I learned about human trafficking. I didn't know about human trafficking. I'm like, what? This is something that happens overseas. This doesn't happen in the United States.
It's not talked about enough. No, it's not.
It is not. So, I looked at literature. It was limited. Knowledge regarding this topic was pretty much non-existent. I'm thinking, do I really want to do my doctoral degree on this? This is going to be hard. But it really sparked my interest. This definitely, I thought, like I said, it doesn't happen in the United States. So what I learned was that many victims of human trafficking come in contact with us, healthcare providers, and like myself, we fail to recognize that these people are victims. We lack the knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And it can be uncomfortable to try to address it.
It can be uncomfortable. And, and I think about being that young nurse. I'm sorry, Lisa. But I look at it and, and I thought that implicit bias when I was that young nurse. So to us, they were prostitutes. They were people who were addicted to drugs or seeking and coming in with STIs. So that really increased it. Increased my passion.
Absolutely. And we have to remember we're not there to judge. We're there to provide care. And right. I think we do miss that. And I think I'm probably the same age as you. We'll stop talking about at 20. So yeah, I got you. Tell,
Absolutely.
we'll just pretend. We'll stop at 20. So, give me some statistics on national averages about, human trafficking and what's good for us to know and the audience to know. Because you're right, people, I think we have in our mind, it's not here, but it is
Mhm.
here.
Mhm. So, I'll do my little blurb and then I'll break it down. But my blurb is like, we try to avoid statistics because somebody will catch you with a gotcha, because they're
Okay.
so hidden. It's so hidden in regards to this crime. It's right in front of us, but we don't see it. So human trafficking is this pervasive crime, but overall it really does impact over 50 million people worldwide.
Gosh.
So we as healthcare providers, we play a huge role in identifying these victims. So even though I said I won't go into stats, I'll give you just a few of them, but the reality is, even though there's about 50 million people trafficked worldwide, millions are trafficked right here within the United States. That's the part we fail to miss. 12 million of these children, or trafficked survivors or victims are children.
Mm.
So it's a sad reality when we look at it because many of these individuals, they're people. Their mothers, their fathers, there's brothers and sisters. So it provides some insight into the severity of human trafficking. So we look at that 50 million people, about 54% are trapped in modern slavery, that are trapped in modern slavery are women and girls. Sex
Mm.
trafficking is common, and child sex trafficking has been reported in all 50 states right here in the United States. So
Wow.
the key thing though, we're like, okay, how do we get rid of it? It's over $173 billion in illegal profits, so it's going to be hard to get rid of. So human trafficking is the second most profitable illegal industry right here in the United States. So we look at what do we do? We're thinking education, education. We have to educate and prevent.
That just, I can see why you're passionate. It just
Mhm.
elicits a piece of fury within your heart that that's happening to women and children. How horrible. So, in primary care, ERs, urgent cares, I mean, any of that kind of gamut, how can we identify and intervene? What's our best strategy going forward?
Okay, so I'll go off on a little tangent. So
Go ahead.
definitely raise your hand or anything if you want to interject or ask some questions. But one of the main things I like to do is look at what we should know as healthcare providers. So we start by recognizing that many of the patients present to us with injuries, abuse, untreated healthcare conditions. Yes, they don't disclose these conditions or the circumstances in which they got this. Oftentimes it's because they're scared. They don't trust us. They're fearful about what's going to happen to them or someone they love. They're also distrustful of authorities. They've been taught and trained with abuse and harm to not trust. So, this lack of disclosure may be due to a lack of knowledge on that victim's part because they may not identify as a survivor or victim. Many are unaware that they're even being exploited and do not identify as victims of human trafficking. So we as healthcare providers, we have a responsibility. We want to be vigilant. We want to be educated so that we know what some of the signs and symptoms are. And I'll go into some of that a little bit in just a few minutes. But we want to create an environment so that victims, if they come to us, they can open up. And that means we have to leave our implicit bias at the door. So we're in this unique position because research literature says that over 88% of survivor victims came in contact with a healthcare provider
Oh my
and we
goodness.
fail to identify it. So the problem is that human trafficking can look different depending on the person. It's anybody can be a victim of human trafficking. So we talked about vulnerable populations, but it can pretty much be anyone. The situation, the type of trafficking, it can involve sex trafficking, labor trafficking, or even trafficking for criminal activity. So really realizing that as we're doing our assessment as healthcare providers, we want to provide compassionate care. So we need to know about trauma-informed care. We need to leave our bias at the door. What is implicit bias? What are we thinking before that person walked in the room? We want to take the time to complete the assessment and document our findings. Key thing is we need to know the signs and be comfortable asking difficult questions. We think about resources and we're like, okay, we're going to give them some resources, but we need to know what these resources are, not just, oh, here's a piece of paper with a resource. We need to vet them. We need to make sure they're reliable resources and then identify who do we call. Do we have a protocol in place at our facility? So, when we look at what does the healthcare provider need to know, we want to recognize that these people, these patients, these victims are presenting with physical and emotional signs. So we have to start asking questions. Are they showing up with unexplained or inconsistent injuries based on that story they told us about what happened? We have to look at, that lack of control. Is there someone with them who's talking above them, who's in control, who's the authority, asking or answering all the questions we may ask? We have to look and see if they're malnourished, poor hygiene, and untreated medical conditions, because victims often lack access to proper health care. So when we have them in that moment, we may need to look at all of those chronic conditions and be able to see what can we do at that moment. And then they may appear fearful. They're afraid. At the crisis center, I've had persons that I've cared for who's had to say, wait a minute, I need to leave and come back later. And I need to be okay with that because they're thinking about their safety. They're looking at, I can't be missed. So basically, sometimes that companion, that person with them, may insist on being present. They want to control and speak for them. See how we can get them away from that person. Maybe we need to go get a urine specimen or a lab draw. That'll allow us to get them separated from that controlling companion and allows us to ask questions. And then at the end of the day, meet them where they're at. See what they need in that moment. So looking at our signs and symptoms, looking at those injuries they're presenting with that is not consistent with what they're saying they're there for, and asking more questions. That's going to be key for us as healthcare providers.
Oh, excellent. That's a lot. That's a lot of information. Um, so when you identify that person, you said that sometimes they want to leave and come back. So it's not always our goal to try to get them away and try to get the authorities involved. Sometimes it's just taking it one step at a time, would you say?
I would 100% agree with you, one step at a time. So this person, once again, may not identify as a victim. So
Okay.
if we're looking at that one step at a time, we're treating them in that moment of what they need. So we may take 7 touch points. We may see them 7 times before they identify as something as being wrong, that this is not, this person that I'm with is not taking care of me, that, I'm in harm's way, or can I leave? Think about it when we look at domestic violence. People who leave are at a higher risk once they leave that situation. So, can we leave? Can we safely leave? And what happens when we leave is what's racing through that person's mind, even if they do identify as a victim.
And that's why this podcast and your education is so imperative because I'm ignorant to that process. And I will have to say, as a mom and a woman, my initial reaction is get them out, fix them, save them, fix the world, because that's how we are as nurses and nurse practitioners. We want to fix everybody, especially women. So that's so great for you to tell me because you just gave me a huge amount of education. I probably was just drinking all of that in because that wouldn't have been I mean, you really taught me something valuable. My would be grab them and run or get out the door and probably would have hurt thank you. That was great.
And you know
And
what else,
speak,
Lisa? If we
yes,
did
tell me.
that, there's a good chance. So I'll give you a couple points. Think safety, right? So you as a healthcare provider, think about your safety. And I know it's hard when we think we got to think of ourselves first, but this person's been trained. So if this person is confronted by that companion, then they're probably going to turn on us. So we need to think safety for ourselves first, because think of this trauma that they've been through. This is a person, let's go back to who's the trafficker, if it's okay if I step back for just a moment. So when we look at who the trafficker is, that we're thinking, okay, someone who snatched them off the street. Many times that trafficker is known. In my
Okay.
PhD
Okay.
research that I did, I was able to interview over 30 survivors of human trafficking. Over 50% were trafficked by family members, mothers,
Mm.
brothers, fathers, uncles, grandfathers.
And does
Many
it
of
make it
them,
harder? It's harder to fix that, isn't it? Because it's
it
their
is.
family. Oh
It's
gosh.
harder to fix that. That's a whole new level of social, therapy, things that we need to know and do. And how do we recognize it? one little girl, one patient, and these were adults now. She said, how do I know that this is not? She's like, I thought this is what all little girls did after church.
Oh my gosh. So you've
So,
very much enlightened me today. That because that is not what my mind would have went to. Oh, that's amazing. That's horrifying. Mm,
so when we look at today's kids, we're thinking, okay, social media. Social media is huge right now because that's how they're being targeted. So when we look at the children being targeted, and once again, many of them started as children being trafficked. So we're dealing with many adults now, but now we're looking at those adverse childhood experiences because it happened as a child.
mm,
So when we look at it now today, being vigilant, who is your kid online with? Because this is someone in that chat room or that game room who's
mm-hmm.
pretending to be a child and saying, hey, meet me in this other place. And then they start talking to them about, hey, I'm your friend, let's meet up. And the child's thinking that, this is a child.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh,
Or
scary. That's so
it
scary.
becomes very scary. So it's not necessarily that white van that my kid always tells me about. Mama, that white van. I'm like, no, that white van is in your house already.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
already on that computer with that child. So
Mm.
a lot of things going on. And, I'm looking forward to when I'm able to present in detail in Orlando because we'll be able to go over a lot of the details that we've touched on today.
Oh gosh, I mean, in just the few moments we've been on here, I have learned so much, you know, and wow, that was eye-opening. So give me, obviously, I need a lot from you. What are some do's and don'ts regarding human trafficking, or, like mandated by the government? And you touched on that a little bit, like I'm not supposed to go in there and jerk that person up and run out the back door,
Mhm.
guns blazing. Here in the
Right.
South, we just want to fix everything. So
We
tell me the
do.
do's and don'ts. Give me those tips I need.
I'm going to start with so that I don't forget your point of being able to grab them and save them. We as healthcare providers, we get burned out because they go back again and again and again.
Oh gosh.
Even if we get them out, they go back because what if they've known nothing different? They don't know anything different. This person loves them. If it's a boyfriend, if it's a family member, this is the only family they have. So they go back over and over again. So we have to not get burned out while we're trying to help them. So we start with the adult survivors, recognizing that they get to choose unless it's, disabled, elderly, children. So we can safely provide them information. And I think about how do we safely do it? Maybe it's a tongue blade. Maybe it's a little comb. We definitely don't give them a piece of paper and an index card because now they're at risk, right?
Hmm.
So we don't do it that way. So we meet them where they are. Sometimes I have so many more questions than I can get answers for. And I meet them where they are because hopefully I'll meet them again and build that trust and be able to get more information. Recognize that anybody can be a victim. So that's another do, look at who's at risk, what puts that person at risk, and who are the traffickers. And what does that survivor need when you first come in contact with them? They may just need a shower and some food. So do that, provide them with that instead of thinking, I need to get all my answers right now because you're probably not going to get any. Many victims, once again, I'm going to reinforce that, do not identify as human trafficking victims, and it's boys, girls, men, women, LGBT community, anyone. But remember, your safety is important. Do not put your safety or that person's safety at risk. Don't push for answers. They've been trained to keep silent. They've been trained to lie. They've been beaten, raped, tortured, and abused over and over again. They do not trust. Now, going back to being a mandatory reporter, we're mandatory reporters. So if that person's under the age of 18, they cannot consent. It's considered human trafficking, even if they said, I'm out there self-prostituting. They can't consent. It's human trafficking. We are mandatory reporters there. But, recognizing that it's a sensitive issue, we have to respond with care, professionalism, and discretion. So going back to ensuring their safety, asking non-threatening questions and being respectful, and compassionate. We want to contact the proper authorities. First, if it's in your workplace, I'm going to tell everybody, see what your protocol is, follow your protocol, follow your guidelines. So you may want to call someone right away and your job says no. You have to look at where you are and what you need to do and what you can do. And recognize that there's an anti-trafficking or human trafficking hotline. And that number is 188 373-7888. So if you're ever out in the street and you're concerned, you can call that number. Now, I do want to say that if you call local numbers like 911 or the local emergencies, ask if they have a human trafficking task force, because that will make a difference also, instead of just a regular police officer coming out. Because unfortunately, just like us as healthcare professionals, they're not all informed. So think about it. If you called on someone who you thought were being harmed and it's somebody over the age of 18 and they look like a prostitute, they're probably going to get arrested as a prostitute. They're going to get treated as that criminal instead of the victim. So just being cognizant of that. It doesn't mean don't call. We still need to call, but we want to see if there's resources, if there's a human trafficking, team or something to be able to help. And then lastly, if we're looking at resources and support, make sure that we know what they are, that we can answer questions, that they are really there for that person. Because if we give them an index card or a business card, say, hey, call this number, and they call and they say, we can't help you, you've lost that trust. So that's really important.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts or information you want to share with the audience? You've been so thorough. Thank you.
Lisa, one of the biggest things I want to say, and I know I've said that like a bunch of times, biggest thing, so I'm sorry. We have to look at,
it is a big thing.
It is a big thing. We have to look at, what happens when they get out. So we're thinking, okay, we're going to rip them out of trafficking, and then what happens? And that's really where I focused my research on. So if we go back to that little girl who never went to school or who didn't learn how to do anything, who can't write a checkbook, who has a record because part of trafficking is getting them to be a criminal for stealing so that, now you're stuck. How are they going to get a job? They don't know how to make a bed. They don't know how to write a check or pay a bill. So resources with reintegration back into the community, finding a place for them to go so that they can learn how to live or how to do the things that they may never have learned is really important. And then legislatively, if we can make all 50 states have mandatory training, that's already a huge step. And then providing some resources so that they can go from reintegration to learning how to live again and being survivors and thriving in the community. So pulling them out, unfortunately, doesn't help if we don't have anywhere for them to go. And if that's the only place they've been, where are they going to go?
Where do you find that they go? Are there certain places set up for that, or
what usually happens? Usually there's some facilities that provide housing for trafficking survivors, and it doesn't work if we send them just to the domestic violence place. One of the survivors I interviewed is like, yeah, I went there and they kicked me out because he figured out where I was and I had to go back to him. And guess what happened to me after that? So we are looking at having homes, safe homes where survivors can go. And it's not just for a minute, but it may be a couple years, because now we have to teach them how to get a job, how to stay in a job. Before they go into the home, we need somewhere to go in between, because they don't accept them if they're on drugs, or having a place with children that they can take children. So lots of barriers in regards to finding a place. And then I say that and say, okay, so boys, finding a home for boys is even harder because there's fewer facilities for boys. And even with all of my knowledge, all of my skills, I had a survivor come to me in the crisis center at 2 a.m. There's nobody to call at 2 a.m. So I'm calling a friend. I'm like, okay, where can I get her to go? They're like, we don't open till 8. What? So lots of barriers in regards to finding immediate resources. And those are things that we are working on as advocates in the community. So my final thoughts is, if you're out there, education is vital to fight this battle against human trafficking, especially as we focus on the kids, because they are at risk. Many of the survivors I've met were born and raised right here in the United States. And I've met many survivors. Most of them, their trafficker were family members or boyfriends. So making your colleagues aware of the signs of trafficking, providing patient education, it's like all we can do is educate over and over again, and put it into prevention with our kids today. Engaging community outreach. Those are all things that we can do to be advocates.
What an amazing platform you have, and what a big heart you have. Because I know your heart is to fix things and to make people better, but that's a struggle for you. You have to go to bed at night and think about those people. So thank you. for all you've done. You're amazing. I want to thank you for taking time to share with us today and join us. If anyone wants to hear your fantastic teaching live with us in April in Chicago and in November in Orlando. We are truly grateful and blessed to have you as a nurse practitioner and your work in this population. And I cannot wait to hear more from you in 2025.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for this opportunity to increase awareness and to just, let my voice be heard. So thank you so very much.
And it is a wonderful voice. What an amazing platform. And for our audience, please be sure to check out npace.org for information on all things NPACE and our Learning Center at learn.npace.org. NPACE is an ANCC certified accreditor of continuing education, offering in-person CE conferences and online CE programs for nurse practitioners. We welcome you to visit npace.org or npace.org for more information on everything NPACE. We have lots of opportunities and learning for nurse practitioners. Thank you guys for joining us. And thank you again, Dr. Ernewein. You have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank
you,
Bye-bye.
NPACE. Bye.
Thank you.